Rodrigo Duterte, the rise of the Punisher. I'm going to take you on a brief history tour of one of the most colourful and perhaps most brutal national leaders of recent years. I enlisted our investigative experts and podcast legends Bob and Mary to examine the career of Rodrigo Duterte, the president of the Philippines. Rodrigo Duterte, who was often called the rise of the Punisher because of the effective but, to say the least, controversial methods he used against crime in his homeland, especially in the fight against drug trafficking and organized crime. This isn't just a podcast about a single figure, it's a window into the complexities of governance, power, and the impact of leadership on a nation's destiny. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why Duterte's story matters and how his legacy will shape future generations. We'll reveal the lesser-known aspects of Duterte's life, the untold stories behind his policies, and the perspectives of those who lived through his leadership. You'll also hear about the critical lessons his tenure offers to leaders, citizens, and nations, grappling with similar challenges. Whether you're familiar with Duterte or learning about him for the first time, this episode offers a balanced, comprehensive, and thought-provoking look at his life. So grab your headphones, get comfortable, and prepare for a deep dive into one of the most fascinating political stories of our time. Stay with us until the end. You won't want to miss the insights, revelations, and the lasting impact of Rodrigo Duterte's journey. Welcome to the Truth Confessions. Let's begin.
Oh, you. Oh, 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 oh,
Dear listener, I would like to suggest you check out our website, manstew.com. There you will find many more stories. Free podcasts, stories, books, movies, and music from the rock years of the 1950s to the present day. manstew.com.
oh, you. Oh, 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 oh.
Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive. Today we're tackling a figure who sparked a ton of debate, Rodrigo Duterte.
Oh yeah, Duterte.
Whether you're brushing up for like a big meeting or just fascinated by leaders who really defy the norm, we're going to break it all down. We're using some excerpts about the Punisher
Right.
to paint a clearer picture of this, well, really complex guy.
You know, what always strikes me about Duterte is how much you can see his later political style in his early life.
Oh, interesting.
I mean, the guy was practically raised in politics, right? His dad was a governor.
Okay, yeah.
But here's the twist, his mom, a dedicated social worker.
Wow.
Total contrast, right?
Yeah.
That mix of power and social conscience, I think it really left a mark on him.
It's like those early experiences kind of shaped his whole personality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we hear about young Rodrigo getting expelled from school, not just once, but multiple times.
Oh, wow.
Clearly not afraid to break the rules.
Definitely not.
But here's the thing. People who knew him back then, they talk about his fierce loyalty. Like he was always ready to protect those he cared about.
Interesting.
Almost like he saw himself as a protector, even as a kid.
And you know, that protectiveness, it becomes this recurring theme throughout his life.
Really?
Yeah, it's like he sees himself as shielding the Philippines from chaos, no matter the cost.
Oh.
And this really comes to the forefront when he becomes mayor of Davao City back in '88.
Davao City. Wasn't that like notorious for being pretty lawless?
Exactly, it was riddled with crime. And Duterte, he vowed to clean it up.
You said?
He did. But his methods, let's just say they were controversial.
Oh, I bet.
We're talking curfews, bans on alcohol, a total crackdown on smoking. Basically, he laid down the law.
And people listened.
They did. Crime rates plummeted and Davao transformed into, well, a model of order.
That's pretty impressive, but I have a feeling there's more to the story.
There is, because this is where we run into the Davao Death Squad,
Oh, well.
a vigilante group, often linked to Duterte, killings without due process, targeting criminals and, suspected criminals. It became a really dark period.
So this time in Davao, it's crucial for understanding Duterte, right?
Mhm.
It's like a blueprint for his leadership style, this mix of effectiveness and, brutality.
Exactly.
He was willing to break the rules to get things done.
It raises a lot of questions about the balance between security and human rights. It's
Yeah.
a pattern that continues throughout his career, and it's what ultimately propels him to national attention.
So by the 2000s,
The Punisher was a national figure.
a household name.
People either loved his tough approach or were deeply disturbed by it.
And then, of course, comes the 2015 presidential election.
Yeah.
You've got Duterte, this totally unconventional figure going up against the entire Philippine political establishment.
Right.
And what does he promise? He's going to wipe out crime, corruption, and the drug trade all in 6 months.
Bold promises.
Some might even say crazy.
But, it really resonated with a lot of Filipinos. They were fed up with the way things were.
Makes sense.
And Duterte, he presented himself as the answer, the one who'd finally bring change.
And he won, right.
By a landslide. It was a huge turning point in Philippine politics.
This outsider, this Punisher, takes control of the whole country.
It was a seismic shift.
So what happens next?
Well, one of the first things Duterte does is launch his war on drugs.
War on drugs.
This wasn't just some policy, it was a full-on crusade.
Yeah.
He basically framed drug use as this national threat.
A threat.
Yeah, like a cancer that needed to be eradicated.
And his methods for dealing with this threat.
Pretty aggressive, to say the least.
This war on drugs, it wasn't just about, like, arresting people or rehab.
No,
Things escalated really quickly.
it became a campaign of violence, yeah.
We're talking extrajudicial killing.
Killings without any legal process, yeah.
And it was happening on a massive scale.
It was a dark time.
Police raids, vigilante groups,
Human rights groups, the UN, they were all condemning the violence, calling for investigations. Thousands of people were killed.
Wow.
A lot of them from poor communities.
So what was Duterte's response to all this?
He basically doubled down.
Doubled down.
Yeah. He said desperate times call for desperate measures.
Huh.
He insisted that he was protecting the nation, that the casualties, they were unavoidable in this war.
It's a chilling thought, really.
I mean, drug addiction is a serious problem, no doubt.
Right.
But the methods used in this war, they've raised some serious questions,
About ethics, about the law.
Exactly. It's a stark example of how leaders can exploit fear to justify really extreme measures.
It's a scary thought.
It is.
But it wasn't just the war on drugs, right?
No.
Duterte also shook things up with his economic policies.
Oh, yeah. He wanted to transform the Philippines into a modern economic powerhouse.
He had that Bill program, right?
Right. It was all about massive infrastructure projects. Roads, bridges, airports. He even wanted to build new cities,
Ambitious.
to say the least. Duterte, he envisioned a Philippines with modern transportation, state-of-the-art healthcare, world-class education.
Wow. So did it work? Did he achieve all that?
Well, there were definitely some successes.
Okay, like what?
New roads, for example. They reduced travel times, improved connectivity, made trade easier.
That makes sense.
And the construction boom itself, it created jobs, brought much-needed investment into the economy.
So it wasn't all bad.
No, not at all. But there were downsides, too. Some projects were really delayed. Budgets went way over.
Classic.
And there were accusations of corruption.
So same old story.
Kind of, yeah. And, there were also concerns about the impact of all this construction on the environment, on local communities.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It shows that even with good intentions, these big development projects can have consequences you don't anticipate.
Unintended consequences.
Exactly.
It's interesting, though. Like with the war on drugs, you see this pattern with Duterte, right?
Yeah.
Bold action, getting things done quickly, but also this disregard for rules, for procedure.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Makes you wonder,
About what?
about the trade-offs. Efficiency versus accountability. Getting things done versus, doing things the right way.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's complicated.
It really is.
And it speaks to how complex Duterte is, I think.
Definitely.
He was a pragmatist,
Yeah.
focused on result.
And also a populist.
Right. Willing to play by his own rules.
Exactly.
Now, let's talk about something Duterte really pushed for, but ultimately couldn't achieve.
Oh, you mean his dream of turning the Philippines into a federal republic?
That's the one.
Yeah, that was a big part of his platform.
So what was the thinking there?
He believed that a federal system would give more power to the regions.
More autonomy.
Exactly. Break the grip of Manila. Empower local communities.
Decentralization.
He envisioned a Philippines where each region could control its own resources, tailor its own development strategies.
Interesting. It sounds like he was trying to address those regional inequalities we talked about earlier.
Yeah, he was.
Give a voice to those provinces that felt ignored by the central government.
Right. It was a radical proposal, though.
Restructuring the entire political system.
Yeah, and it faced a lot of pushback.
Why? What happened?
Well, members of Congress, they weren't too keen on giving up their power.
Of course not.
And a lot of people, they worried that federalism would just lead to more division.
Fragmentation.
Yeah, weaken the nation as a whole.
So what happened?
In the end, those fears won out.
Duterte couldn't pull it off.
No. Even with all his political capital, he couldn't get enough support for federalism.
Huh. So it's like a big what if in Philippine history.
Absolutely. What if he'd succeeded? How would it have changed the country? It's fascinating to think about.
It really is.
It shows you that even the most powerful leaders have their limits.
You can't always get what you want.
Nope. Changing a country's political system, it's not easy.
You need consensus.
You need compromise.
You need to convince people.
Exactly. And in this case, the resistance was just too strong.
But where Duterte really made waves, where he really shook things up, was in foreign policy.
Oh, yeah. He threw out the old playbook,
Completely.
charted a whole new course for the Philippines on the world stage.
It was like he was rewriting the rules.
Exactly.
And his relationship with the United States, the Philippines' longtime ally,
Oh, that was interesting.
it was turbulent, to say the least.
He openly criticized American foreign policy, called out what he saw as hypocrisy, interference.
He even threatened to cut ties completely,
He
right?
did, and it definitely ruffled some feathers in Washington.
I bet it did.
It was a huge shift, a total departure from decades of cooperation.
So what was behind this? Why did he do it?
Well, part of it was about appealing to his base back home.
His supporters.
Yeah. There's definitely some anti-American sentiment in the Philippines.
Because of the history.
Exactly. And Duterte knew that his tough talk would play well with those who resented America's influence.
So it was a political strategy?
Partly, yeah. But it was also about pragmatism.
Pragmatism.
He saw that China was on the rise, becoming a global superpower.
Right.
And he wanted to position the Philippines to benefit from that.
Bart.
It was a calculated risk, balancing relations with the U.S. and China, trying to get the best deal for the Philippines.
Playing both sides.
In a way, yeah.
But he didn't just focus on the U.S. and China.
No, not at all. He also built ties with Russia, Japan, other Asian nations.
Trying to diversify.
Exactly. He wanted to broaden the Philippines' diplomatic and economic partnerships.
It was a bold strategy, reimagining the Philippines' role in the world. All right, so we're back for the final part of our deep dive into Rodrigo Duterte.
The home stretch.
We've covered a lot of ground, his rise, his some of those controversial tactics, his big ambitions, and how he, totally changed the Philippines' relationship with the rest of the world.
Yeah, he didn't shy away from making big moves.
Definitely not. But now, let's get to the heart of it. What's his legacy? How will Duterte be remembered?
It's complicated, just like the man himself.
I was going to say, it's not a simple answer, is it?
Nope. It's a mix of good and bad, progress and setbacks. People are going to be debating it for years to come, I think.
True, true. I mean, you can point to some pretty concrete achievements, can't you?
Oh, absolutely. The Philippine economy grew under Duterte.
Right.
There were improvements in infrastructure, roads got built, in some places crime went down. You can't just ignore those things.
You're right. Those are real, tangible changes.
And for a lot of Filipinos, their lives actually got better under Duterte. There was this feeling that he was actually getting things done, breaking through all the gridlock,
Delivering on his promises.
Exactly. He projected this image of strength, of decisiveness. And for a nation that was tired of corruption and inefficiency, it was appealing.
It's that strongman image, right?
Yeah. But of course, there's the other side of the coin.
It's a darker side.
The human rights abuses, the extrajudicial killings, silencing critics. These are dark chapters that they really cast a shadow over his presidency.
Those are serious accusations.
And Duterte's methods, they often seem to disregard the rule of law. you know?
And that's a dangerous precedent, isn't it?
It is. It sends a message that the ends justify the means.
Right.
It's impossible to ignore the human cost of Duterte's policies. Thousands of lives were lost in the war on drugs.
And so many of those deaths, they're still unexplained.
Exactly. The erosion of democratic norms, the attacks on the press, the crackdown on anyone who disagreed with them, it created a climate of fear in the Philippines.
It's a reminder, isn't it, that progress can come at a very steep price.
Yeah.
It makes you think about what compromises are acceptable,
Mm.
and the pursuit of order, of security. Can a nation really thrive if it sacrifices its principles along the way?
Big question.
Big questions, yeah.
And questions that the Philippines is still grappling with today.
And it's fascinating, I think, how even after leaving office, Duterte remained popular.
Oh, yeah. He still had a lot of support.
His daughter, Sarah Duterte, being elected vice president, I mean, that shows the Duterte name still holds a lot of weight.
It does. And that brand of populism, it clearly resonates with a lot of Filipinos.
Like you said, they want a strong leader,
Someone who'll shake things up.
someone who will challenge the system.
Exactly. But it also raises concerns about the strength of democratic institutions,
Their ability to withstand that kind of strongman approach.
Yeah, the potential for power to become too concentrated.
Right. And then there are the legal challenges that Duterte is facing
Oh, right. The International Criminal Court's investigation.
into those alleged crimes against humanity,
Mm.
especially the ones related to the war on drugs.
It's still ongoing. Duterte has rejected the ICC's authority, of course.
Right.
But it shows that leaders can be held accountable for their actions, even after they leave office.
Even after their time in power is over.
Exactly.
It feels like Duterte's story isn't finished yet.
Oh, definitely not. His impact on the Philippines, it's still unfolding.
He really did change the political landscape.
He did. It's hard to say what the long-term consequences will be, but his influence is still being felt.
And his legacy.
Complex, like we said.
Progress and brutality, defiance and charisma.
It's a real mix.
So what have we learned from Rodrigo Duterte? I mean, what are the big takeaways from this deep dive?
Well, I think his rise and his time in office, they offer some really valuable lessons about leadership, about the appeal of populism.
About the balance between security and freedom.
Exactly. It's a story that forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths,
To really think about our values.
and to have honest conversations about the kind of future we want for our countries, for the world,
That's what we've tried to do in this deep dive.
to present a nuanced view of Duterte.
He's a man who doesn't fit neatly into any box.
He was a force of nature, a disruptor.
A leader who left a lasting mark, that's for sure.
No doubt about that.
His story reminds us that history isn't always a neat and tidy narrative,
It's messy.
full of triumphs and tragedies.
And it's up to us to learn from it, to shape a better future.
To be engaged citizens.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we encourage you to keep exploring, keep questioning, keep the conversation going. The story of Rodrigo Duterte, like the story of the Philippines itself, it's still being written. And your voice matters.
It does.
Until next time, keep those brains buzzing.
Oh, you. Oh, ooh, 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 ooh.
Dear listener, I would like to suggest you check out our website, manstew.com. There you will find many more stories. Free podcasts, stories, books, movies and music from the rock years of the 1950s to the present day. manstew.com.
Oh, you.